everybody. Welcome to Code as Craft. Thanks for being with us. My name's Daniel. I'm a software engineer here at Etsy. We are really excited to have Derek Featherstone here to talk to us about accessibility. Derek is a world-renowned expert on accessibility and inclusive design and all kinds of things that we will all probably be embarrassed we don't know more about, and we as an industry definitely could do a much better job with. And so he is the lead of Simply Accessible, which helps, I think, a big array of different companies tackle their accessibility problems. And I think we're all going to learn a lot. So I'm going to turn it over to Derek.
Thank you. So before we start, I want to say this is already my favorite talk that I've ever given. Because not only do I have a beer, but some of you out there have beer too. I think that's just kind of exciting. So cheers. And if you're watching at home, I encourage you to go and get yourself a Brooklyn Summer Ale. It's brewed in New York. Yeah, this is fun. All right. So how many of you, I want to get a sense of what you know in terms of accessibility and how you would sort of rate yourself in terms of your knowledge skill with web accessibility. So if 0 was you're brand new to accessibility and 5 is you're like, you do this all day, every day, maybe not all day, every day, but you do a lot of accessibility, so you're really well versed in it. So hands up if you're like a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, you can come up and do this then. All right. I've been doing accessibility work for about 15 years, and I like to think that I know a lot about accessibility. And in 2011, this guy changed everything that I thought I knew about accessibility. He put a new lens on things that I just didn't have before. This is Henry Butler, who is a blind jazz musician, plays the piano. Incredible story. He went blind very early on in his life, and he puts on this production that is called Sight, Sound, Soul. And the idea behind this is that they create an inclusive experience for everybody to experience music and art, and they create this experience together. And he blew me away. I can't play the piano. I cannot play the piano. I can maybe do a little chopsticks, and that's about it. And this guy is completely blind, and he learned to read music and play music by reading the music in Braille, by learning here's what the left hand needs to be doing, and here's what the right hand needs to be doing, and here's what your feet should be doing. And he learned all of that and put it all together. And he's an incredible musician, and he's part of something that was literally this experience that changed the way that I viewed things. And I want to share some of that with you today. This is that I was at an accessibility conference, and one of the things that they want to do at this conference is get people interested in accessibility but think beyond the web. It's mostly web people that come to this conference, but they want, it's a really important mission for the organization that puts this on. It's an organization called Nobility out of Austin, Texas. And they have this idea that the web should be accessible to everyone, which is great. But they think bigger than that. They really are thinking about making everything accessible to everyone. And this performance is testament to that. They have this fundamental belief that we as a human race have created some incredible things, that we create music, that we came up with ways of creating instruments that play music, and we put them together in ways with rhythm and pace and melody that just blow people's minds. Why should that be something that people with disabilities don't get to experience? Right? It's a really important piece of who we are. And so they work diligently to make sure that not only is the web accessible, but that the arts are accessible to people. So I was at this conference, and it's really, we're all a bunch of web heads in this conference, but we're all sitting there in this almost like an old barn type building in Austin, Texas, for this performance. And the performance is really quite intriguing. So I'm just going to get some volume up here on the, 1 second. Okay, cool. So this is Henry here. He's seated at the piano, and his back is turned to everybody. And they went and created an entire experience. So they've got Henry, and they've got an ASL interpreter. They've got a captioner who is sitting there. You can see right above the ASL interpreter, there's actually a 3-line rolling caption screen. And beside the captioner, they've actually got a person that's doing audio description. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with audio description, but essentially it's for live action, for any video. There's lots of things that you don't pick up if you can't see. So there's lots of action in movies that happens all the time that doesn't involve dialogue or things like that. And you'll see somebody sneaking around the house, particularly now, it's Halloween. People sneaking around the house, and there won't be any dialogue in the movie. So somebody that's blind, they won't see that anything is happening. They won't know that anything is happening. So audio description would be used to tell the person that's tuned in, that's blind, that this 6-foot shadowy character is tiptoeing around the outside of the house, and they will give those details that you can't pick up. And so this performance has audio description. And I want to share a few clips with you. Henry's going to play. He's got pieces that are instrumental. He's got pieces that are vocal. And I want you to watch what happens, and then we're going to break it down a little bit. So let me go back here. Did you see when she started interpreting? And the thing that blew me away about this was really instant. There was no words. That was completely instrumental. Why on earth do we need an ASL interpreter for a performance that has no words? That hadn't even occurred to me. And like as I said, I kind of think I know a few things about accessibility, and that I was like floored. It was like I was completely oblivious to the fact that somebody would be signing a musical performance. Did you see some of the things where she started off and she's kind of giving some introduction to what's happening? And did you see the part where she signs and then she shows that Henry's foot is tapping, right? She shows that. She's conveying pieces of the performance that somebody that is deaf may not get, right? There's all of these different components. Henry's back is turned to the audience. Can people see his hands? No. People can't see his hands, but what she started to do, did you see how she started after a few, what do you call it in music? Bars? After a few bars, that was really, I'm not a musician clearly, but after a few bars, her hands start to sync with his. right? And she's predicting the music. She's feeling that music, and when he's banging on the keys a little harder, she's doing the same, and she's showing that he's going up and down the keys. It was incredible to see all these things that she is conveying that are actually useful to anybody, right? That ASL interpretation wasn't just there for people that were deaf, but for anybody that couldn't see what Henry's hands were doing. That was actually useful and interesting to see what's going on there. So that's actually really one of the first things that hit me. And then we'll look at another. Hang on a second here. Whoops. Look at the next one. So they switch, right? The ASL interpreters, they can't do that forever. That's hard work. So they switch, and we have another one, another ASL interpreter come in, and we'll watch here. This gets a little bit different because now we get into some vocals being included with the performance.
Wears a royal blue suit jacket.
Let me start this one again. So remember we said there was Henry, and then there was an ASL interpreter, and there was a captioner, and then there was an audio describer. This is Celia Hughes, the audio describer. She works for SVA Texas, which is all about accessibility for the arts.
Wears a royal blue suit jacket with satin embossing. He has a lavender shirt and burgundy slacks. His left foot pounds the rhythm as his fingers fly across the piano keys. Two 8-foot paint-splattered plywood boards lean against the wall behind the baby grand piano on the right. 6 sheets of white paper are attached to the boards. Carol has 2 blonde braids tied with a pink bandana. She wears a white t-shirt, blue jeans, and blue plastic gloves. Surrounding the boards are buckets filled with brushes and trays and numerous bottles of paint. Sharon, the interpreter, has a black and white scarf tied around her waist as she moves her body to the music and her fingers playing her invisible keys. The large room is cooled by whirling ceiling fans while the audience members tap in time to the music.
This next piece I wrote.
So Celia's description of it, she created that all entirely live while that performance was happening. In the 5 minutes that the song was playing, she's recreating it in words for people that can't see what's happening. So what was she doing? She was talking about how his back is turned, about how his feet are tapping, some of the same things that the ASL interpreter picked up on, that he's wearing a blue velvet coat, all these little details that you just can't get just by listening to the music, right? That audio description makes this performance complete. It brings those details that somebody can't see to them. And that, to me, is like part of what accessibility is, right? It's all these little fine, subtle details that make a huge difference to making something complete. One of the things that really bugged me in that little segment, I don't know if it bugged you. Well, there was one piece that bugged me, and that was when I put my finger over the lens. I don't know if you saw that, but that's going to haunt me forever. But one of the things that really bugged me about that was when Celia started talking, right, and giving her audio description of that piece of the performance. Did you hear how many other people were talking? It was actually hard to hear Celia. And then I started to think about it, and I'm like, I want to hear this. But then I also thought, well, if I couldn't see that, if I couldn't have seen the performance, hearing that, her audio description is actually my only connection to the ambiance and everything else that is there. And somebody is talking over top of that, right? The primary mechanism by which I'm going to get that ambiance is the feeling in the room, but also the visuals and all the things I'm able to take in. And for somebody that can't see it, that audio description was their primary way of getting a sense of the ambiance apart from the feel in the room. I was really mad that these people were talking over a part of the performance that was really specifically created for somebody and was going to be missed. So did you hear the other piece where there was a meta piece as well, where the one interpreter was actually interpreting the audio description of the first interpreter? I got a little bit Inception-ish there. But then they talk about these large pieces of plywood and paper and the paint that is all over at the side. And we haven't even got to that part yet. It goes further because they're creating an inclusive experience, not just an inclusive musical performance. So what they actually have, they talked about Carol, a woman that was there with pigtail braids and blue plastic gloves and all the tools. She's actually over here and she's painting. So at the same time that he is performing and everybody is taking all of that in, there's another representation of that ambiance, of that music, of that creation, that expression. And that's coming through in this painting. And I love this part. Let's watch Carol a little bit. Did you see the way that she's painting there? Like she's expressing almost exactly the same emotions that the song is. The way that she's painting falls very much in line with the music. And when the music picks up, and this is kind of a side view a little bit later on in the performance, watch as she continues on. If you're kind of wondering what she's got in the painting there, you can see the lid of the piano is kind of up on an angle. That's what's this big blue line is, and that's Henry in behind that. So it's I don't know what style you would call that. Apparently I'm not much of an artist either. But you can see the shapes that are starting to take form as she's working on this. So she continues on. You can see it's growing a little bit more, and I love this piece of it as well. There's an alternative representation or another representation of Henry's foot tapping. It's like everybody keeps coming back to Henry's foot kind of tapping, as that's part of the music, and she's represented that by showing her leg, showing Henry's leg in several different positions, almost like different frames of an animation. Right? If we look further, you can see how she's actually expressed that by showing 3 or 4 different legs all in different positions. I love the way that you see even Carol, the person that's painting, her expressions, the things that she's doing, the way that she's moving her hands mirror perfectly with the music. The very first clip, she was very smooth and slow, you know, going with the flow of the music that was there. And as she's getting to the point where she's finishing up and Henry's kind of pounding on the keys in a very staccato way. You didn't think I knew that word, did you? Very staccato, you know, with that feel to it. The painting takes on the same feel. She's finishing off his hair and she's kind of dabbing the hair on at the same time. And it culminates as he's finishing the song, she completes the painting and it's done. It's this entire complete performance and it's all coordinated, right? They weren't thinking about how do we meet the accessibility requirements of this performance. They could have gotten away with probably just creating having the captioner there. But they did something where it was inclusive and everybody was coordinated. They're all expressing the same emotion, the same intent, the same feel, all of these different things about the music. And all of this, the way that it all comes together, to me, is the way I like to think about accessibility, and this side of it is the fine art of accessibility. And I think what I would love for us to do as we create and craft things on the web is take the same amount of care and the same amount of preparation and thought and put the detail into it that they did. Because this is more than, and so some of you that are new to accessibility, you're probably thinking, well, what am I really talking about here? As people that build the web, we have a responsibility to build sites and applications that everybody can use regardless of their abilities or their disabilities. And taking things to this level kind of lets you deal with some of the subtle details that most people leave behind. What a lot of people talk about now on the web is creating engagement and seductive interfaces and things that build brand loyalty and all these other ideas where we're talking about the web in a way that it's all about experience. It's not about just the transactional side of it. It's much bigger than that. Taking the care to put in some of these subtle details really has an impact on how somebody with a disability uses a website. So in order to do this, to think about this in a really methodical and thoughtful and meaningful way, we need to kind of take things beyond the checklist. So most people, when they first hear about accessibility, they learn about these checklists and these rules that they need to follow. And there's lots of different sets of them out there on the web. But we need to view this checklist, or whichever set of rules you're following, you need to use that as a starting point and not an end point. Right? If it's the end point, then all you're going to ever be doing is creating something where you're meeting the minimum requirements. Right? If we start using things, the checklist as a starting point, and we hit that as our minimum instead of our maximum, then we can move beyond that and start to get into some of these subtle details. And one of the reasons for that, and I think this is really important, is that just because something is compliant and meets all those requirements doesn't mean it's going to be easy to use, right? I'll give you a couple of examples. This is a compliant ramp that exists in Southern California to go from one level to get up to where the elevated train is. And it meets all the requirements in terms of turning radius. So in the physical space, we need to have proper physical accessibility for wheelchair access, for example. And so we have to have a good turning radius around that ramp so that somebody that's in a motorized scooter or in a wheelchair, whether it be electric or a manual wheelchair, that they can get around that corner and their chair or scooter will fit around it as well. There's also certain slope requirements, right? You can't make it too steep or people just won't be able to get up it. So even though this meets all those requirements, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to use or easy for somebody to get up. Take a look at this. This next example is going up roughly, about the same height, maybe a little bit higher. But instead of having 6 switchbacks, this is something where accessibility was built in right from the beginning. They didn't need to build something that was this really tight turning but met the turning radius requirements mechanism to get from one level to the next. They actually built this. This is in Vancouver, and these are called stramps. right? Stairs and ramps together. See similar things in other cities as well. I know I was just in Oslo, Norway, and they had something very similar. When you left the Oslo Central Station, they had something very similar. They know a lot of people are going to use the stairs, but there's lots of people coming out of Oslo Central with luggage. And so they have these ramps that are integrated with the stairs that allow people to easily carry things and roll things up. And I think this is beautiful. This is beautiful design, right? It's meaningful. It's well thought out, and it's nowhere near as difficult to use as the other that other really tall ramp that went from one level to the next. So how do we start thinking this way, and how do we get beyond compliance? Because that's kind of the mindset. And if you're new to accessibility, you're probably going to hear a lot of people saying things like, well, what do we need to do? I just want to know what are the rules I'm going to be judged by, and how do I meet those rules? That's what compliance is all about. But at the end of the day, accessibility is really something bigger than that. It's part of UX. It's part of user experience, right? And when we create things that are minimally compliant, we're doing our job, but we're not creating something that people are going to love to use, right? We're not being true craftspeople of the web, right? The web and design and development is a craft. It truly is. And so we want to look at things this way. This is the Microsoft Surface table. You remember the original Microsoft Surface? They took that name now and they're using it for these little small things, but the original Surface was like a 3-foot by 2-foot table. And this was a photo sharing app that was on it. And I do, actually doing this tomorrow, we're doing a workshop here in town, and we're going to spend time talking about how different people with different disabilities would use this photo sharing app and what some of the challenges they would face in terms of using this multi-touch device. And so one of the challenges, obviously, and we're thinking about people with sort of roughly 5 or 6 different types of disabilities, people with visual impairment, hearing impairment, maybe some type of cognitive difficulty or mobility or a dexterity impairment, or maybe even some speech difficulties. When we look at this, we see probably lots of different challenges. So somebody that can't see the screen, they're not going to know what's on each photo, right? That's a challenge that they're going to face. And so if we wanted to make this an accessible experience, we would need to find some way to address that need. And so we talk about lots of different possible ways that we could create this interface in such a way that it's accessible to people that can't see it. What about people that have low vision? So somebody that has low vision, they can still see, but it may not be, their vision may be blurry, or they need to look at the website that they're looking at or whatever they're looking at really up close, right? They need to magnify things. My dad, this blew me away the other day because my dad, who I don't think is that old, pulled out of his wallet, pulled out one of those little square magnifiers to read a piece of paper that somebody had handed him. I was like, I had no idea that his eyes were getting to that point where he had to pull out a magnifier. And of course, my eyes too, if I tried to, if I tried to read the ingredients list or the government warning on here that tells me that when I get pregnant I shouldn't drink this, I can't read that when it's here. I really need to pull it away in order to read it. That's happening to me. It's probably happening to some of you. So we go through all of these different things with this interface and talk about how do we make this something that's accessible to people with all kinds of different disabilities. And we talk about this. This is the car that everybody's kind of wanting right now, or maybe you don't want it because it's only $120,000, the Tesla. But it has a 17-inch touchscreen in the middle of the dash, right? And there's all kinds of things in that interface that we could create all of these on the web easily, right? This is a slider, this is a toggle button, this is a tabbed interface. You can tell that it's in some kind of a dialogue because it's got that little X up in the top left corner. You could create this on the web if you wanted to. You could create create this interface. And we start to look at all these different challenges. What are the challenges in this interface to potentially make this accessible? There's interesting interactions. I don't know if you've spent any time looking at the Tesla or the videos that are kind of promo videos, but it's 17-inch touchscreen. So when you say, I want to switch to the map, or I want to switch to the nav, or the audio, or the entertainment system, if you tap one of the icons and you hold your finger there, it actually tells you that you can, if you just tap it, it'll display it in the top half of the screen. But if you tap and hold, it will let you determine, do you want to put it in the top half of the screen or the bottom half of the screen? That's what's under the guy's finger right now. He tapped and held, and he's saying, okay, I want it to go in the bottom half. So he's hitting the entertainment system. It's going to show up in the bottom half. There's really interesting interactions there. And there's a really interesting mechanism of centering the sound. So you can press on the driver's seat, simply tap on the driver's seat, and it's going to center the sound on there. If you want to center it in the back seat, you can tap there, or you can use these sliders along the sides. There's lots of interesting interface things going on in there. The last time I'd used this in a workshop, somebody said, well, why does that interface need to be accessible, right? Why would that interface need to be accessible, particularly to somebody that can't see? And I kind of turned to the person, I said, well, they could easily be sitting in the passenger seat, right? And they were like, hadn't even, the immediate reaction was, this is something that's for the driver, right? And not for somebody that's sitting in the passenger seat. So we get into that whole discussion, and we talk about all these challenges of these interfaces, and we come up with all these different reasons or different challenges that people are going to face. And ultimately, every time we do this, we come up with this great big long list that everybody loves because they start to think about things in different ways, right? How would this work? How would that Microsoft Surface table work for somebody that happened to have a prosthetic limb, right? Does your iPhone work, or does your iPad work for somebody that has a prosthetic limb? Probably not, right? Haven't tested it. But my theory, remember when they first came out, there weren't really any styluses. People didn't have any styluses. They hadn't brought them out on the